you have really fought and won against the odds. You have a kind of underdog story.
So I was working nights and weekends, and I couldn't even afford at that point to live on my own. When I first got hired at Sprint, I got told by the CEO that my job was an experiment.
There's a kind of leader who doesn't just rise through the ranks, they rewrite the rules along the way. That's Tracy Nolan, from being called an experiment by her CEO to leading 24,000 employees through a major telecom merger, and now transforming healthcare at Humana. Tracy's journey is really, believe me, anything but conventional. In this episode, she shares the real playbook behind turning setbacks into leadership superpowers. So, if you ever felt underestimated, boxed in, or ready to make a leap, believe me, this one is for you. You have spoken with me about the pressure to overanalyze decisions, replay meetings in your head.
I remember early in my career, every meeting I had, I graded myself. I'd walk out and I'd say, oh, I did a B+, or I did a C-.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to a new episode of the World Class Leader Show. In today's episode, I'm super excited to have with us Tracy Nolan. So Tracy is a Fortune 100 executive, board director, and change advisor known for transforming moments of change into catalysts for growth. As senior vice president at Humana, she leads transformative healthcare initiatives, drawing on extensive experience from previous executive roles at T-Mobile, Sprint, Verizon, and Cox Communications. Throughout her career, Tracy has navigated high-stakes moments across Fortune 100 companies, from becoming Verizon's first female regional president in upstate New York to leading 24,000 employees through the Sprint T-Mobile merger during COVID-19. She also currently serves as a board secretary and audit committee member for Dress for Success Worldwide, an organization aligned with her mission to reshape the future of leadership. Tracy, thank you so much for being on the show with us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to talk to you today. Very excited to be here.
Yeah, and the audience will be very excited too very shortly, because besides your wonderful profile and career, and by the way, huge congratulations, you come from an interesting story. I mean, you have been in very different companies, different industries, and you have been successful. Now, this episode, I think, will offer to the audience an opportunity to appreciate your journey, but most importantly, what does it mean for other people, to potentially follow your path and learning from you, from your experience, your success. But not all success is the same, meaning you have, when we spoke, in preparation for this call, you have an interesting angle, meaning you have really fought and won against the odds, as sometimes people used to refer to. You have a kind of underdog story. So I'm really interested to understand, if you can take us back for a few minutes, what were some defining moments for you where you had to break through barriers others didn't expect you to overcome?
I'll take us way back, actually, to my first, which was, I chose a college to go to that was highly technical, which was so not like the rest of my family who went to liberal arts school. And it was highly focused. And I was an accounting major till my senior year. And I just found it to be highly difficult. And I changed my major my senior year into marketing, research, and management information systems, because I really enjoyed understanding why people did what they did and really doing the research analysis around it. And in doing so, it put me back in not graduating in the typical 4 years. And there was a lot of angst, not only in my home life, but, with my parents, but others who were like, what is she doing? And then I got out of college and I didn't have that degree. I had that degree, but I didn't have that job that all of my other friends who were engineers were getting into. And I started in retailing. So I was working nights and weekends, and I couldn't even afford at that point to live on my own. And I think people thought, I don't know what she's doing in her career. And, it's interesting now to look back at it, because I think that foundation really helped me develop the leader that I am today. But I had to overcome a lot at that time, because it wasn't the typical norm of what people expected me to do, right? But I went with what I felt and challenged myself in what I really enjoyed to do, and let that lead my career going forward. So that was like the first, overcoming. And I look back now and I'm really glad I didn't just stay in accounting and became an accountant, because that would not have satisfied. And I don't think I would have done as well as I've done today because of that reason.
And can we say that has been your common trait of your career? This story, this element of winning, competing, but not always being the favorite for being the winner, is a kind of a recurring theme in your career.
It totally is. Another time when I was at Verizon, I had been there running one of the largest markets, had just turned it around in market share in the Midwest. And my husband actually was living in a whole different state at the time for almost 6 years. And I made a decision to leave that. And because I wanted balance, and I just felt like there was there was more in life than just my role, but I knew I could go find a similar thing. And I remember conversations with the COO at the time where he said, "You'll never go find another job like this that's in a premier region, Fortune 50 company, and, doing as well as you're doing." And, made me feel as if, maybe leaving was the wrong thing to do. But I will tell you that again, I did what I felt I could capably do. And I think I've succeeded more than I would have if I had stayed there. And have another scenario where when I first got hired at Sprint, I got told by the CEO that my job was an experiment. And, Tracy's either going to make it happen, literally on stage in front of everyone who was reporting to me, as we brought her in as an experiment. Either she's going to prove this out, or in 7 months, we're not going to continue down the program. And there were a lot of people at that point who were like, we hope she doesn't make it, because it would change the way we operate. And in 7 months, I churned around a market, gained market share, which is pretty hard to do in a 7 month period of time. I mean, share of gross ads, yes, but market share, actually moving that in a short period of time is difficult. And we did it more productively and than we had ever done before. So it is kind of like this. I'm willing to take chances and put myself out there, and I'm not afraid to fail, but I'm also going to figure out how to win. So that is kind of the story of my career.
Wow. That's amazing. And first of all, I think it's such a great demonstration of your grit and your perseverance. I suppose I don't know you much, but based on what you're saying, clearly do you have something in you that drives that. And also remind me my first. I never really said about this about my first career opportunity was actually in West Africa. In I still remember when my first employer at the time, I was a kind of 27, 28, quite young in my career. And I remember my manager at the time said, "You're gonna either succeed or you're gonna fail." And that was his framing the context for my first role, which it wasn't really empowering, I would say. But I appreciate what doesn't mean, to feel like you're being tested and you're always in you're trying to demonstrate your own value, first of all to yourself, I suppose, and then to others. But then, comes together. So I appreciate that has been primarily your journey. And to me, that leads me to another question I have that is so much connected to it. It's all about confidence. So when people feel like they always need to demonstrate something, they have to, and again, most of the time it's to ourselves first. Are we really able to do something extraordinary, to succeed, to win, whatever in whatever way you say it. And always confidence comes in our way. And I mean, I work and I coach so many leaders that even at the top table, they still suffer from imposter syndrome, even they don't say loudly in front of people. And also there is an element of being a woman leader, which is an important distinction inside of the entire leadership world. And you have spoken with me about the pressure to overanalyze decisions, to reply meetings in your head. So, what really helped you to make this shift in your mind from self doubt, not being able to satisfy or meet people's expectation, to really become a decisive leader?
I remember early in my career, every meeting I had, I graded myself. Every meeting, I'd walk out and I say, "Oh, I did a B plus or I did a C minus," and I would replay. There's certain even moments when I first went into my first board meeting where I had to present, and like I was working myself up so much about how I was going to appear versus really focusing on what the audience wants to hear or what they need to hear. And so a little bit of a mind shift of this isn't about me, this is about what I need to deliver for others to do the job. If you take the pressure off yourself and you think about what the audience wants, it helps a lot. Now, I will have to admit that I have always been a big self-doubter, or everyone says you as a leader you're so super confident, but you really want to do a great job. So also you can take that and make that, that imposter syndrome or that, rate grading or whatever, that you can make that actually work for you by giving yourself grace that, hey, you're going to do, I always say, you're going to do your best today and then you're going to do better tomorrow. So, sometimes you're rushing into that meeting and you haven't had enough time to prep. As long as I just say is I'm going to do my very best today, and I was invited to the meeting, so obviously my voice is important, so I'm going to own the space of what I was given. And those are little techniques because I too coach a lot of women and have seen women who have, women in particular, although I see this also in some men that are self-doubting, that actually holds them back. And I just am not going to allow myself to hold myself back. I am going to use it as a powerful tool to help me do better tomorrow. So if I think about it, I did my very best today, and tomorrow I'm going to try again, right? So maybe it was a C minus today. That's okay. One grade doesn't either pass or fail you from your role. It's just a day. So putting it a little bit in perspective has helped me a lot.
Yeah, such a great and simple and practical tool that to me is from my experience, I would say that's amazing because when you start to feel much more compassion, which I think is the right word now, is the compassion for yourself in being in front of challenging conversations or difficult moments, and knowing that you can be the best you can, but you can also fail, or you cannot necessarily be as impactful as you can be, which to me illuminates the power of feeling like that we have a gap for ourselves in order to go where we want to. And when you live in the gap, you live in a possibility to create something new and extraordinary for yourself. Because when you start to feeling that everything works and you're perfect and nothing it could be better, etc., there is no possibility for you to improve, right?
Right. And I mean, there's nothing, I always say, you're either, you're never standing still. You're either moving forward or backwards. And,
Yes.
people who think that they're perfect, like I'm still taking classes today. I'm always learning, whether it was just learning a new language or whether it's learning something. I mean, that's what makes you move forward. So when people think that they're perfect and they're, accomplished and there's nothing more to do, then I feel like they've lost what really can help critically make something great. I had a quick story. I had a doctor once tell me that, Tracy, you're too nice. Like, you're too nice. Like, I don't know how you're in corporate America doing what you do in a Fortune 100 company. And I go, I think it's that nicety and that fact that I care probably is what actually is making me thrive. So, yes, do I sometimes take things personally, and then I'm like, no, it's not really me, it's about the problem, right? Like if you take yourself out of it and give yourself a little grace, it can go a long way.
Yes, even people to me they said I'm maybe too nice, and I can understand. In the corporate world, when we unfortunately the association of corporate with politics is so strong, and clearly being nice has been perceived as a negative trait. Talking about leadership and how to show up. First of all, you made a bold decision of changing careers, meaning you've been incredibly successful, but you are one of the not that many example of leaders that have really shifted industries. By the way, so I know a lot of great leaders. They move from one industry to another, but not necessarily as you did. What was the drive for you to join Humana and join healthcare, which seems to be a very new industry, at least when you join, from a very business driven, industries like telecommunications, etc. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Sure. So I actually wasn't really thinking of changing industries, but I also was curious, and curiosity drives, a lot of my decision was, could I take the skill set of what I did in telco and apply it to healthcare from just an operational perspective? But what really drew me to healthcare is, first of all, growing up, my dad was a vice president for Blue Cross Blue Shield, so he was in the healthcare industry. So I knew of it, but I also the standing joke in our family is my husband always said, someday in that, whenever you retire or you go into your next career, you're going to be a physician's assistant, a nurse, or you're going to be doing something in healthcare because my parents they had me late in life. So unfortunately, I've lost both of them. But when they both were sick for many years, I would spend a lot of time in the hospitals, and I would be adopting the floor. Like I'd be adopting the individual that was in the room next door. If they didn't have family coming by, I'd be going and helping them out. It's like it's really core to who I am to care and want to give back. So the combination of taking what I've done from an operations business strategic basis and how to interact and make wireless at one time that was pretty complicated to figure out what plan and what you sign up for and what you do, and try to bring that into the healthcare space sounded pretty fascinating. And the other story about this one that's super interesting is I had just had gone right before I joined Humana. Within weeks of joining Humana, I was up at Harvard taking a class on women executives on boards. And the professor said in the meeting, like, one of the worst things you can do later in your career is to change industries. So, of course, I put my hand up and say, guess what I'm doing? And he's like, oh, I think it's a bad decision.
Oh,
But
really?
I would tell you that I think I've done pretty well and I'm certainly enjoying it. And so to me, it's a challenge, but it's also this role really feels core to who I am, not only from a leadership perspective, but the core and the caring and trying to take healthcare and make it less complicated at a time when people really need it. So that's what drives me. And so this feels really great to be able to try to do that.
Yeah, look, it sounds like there is a bigger and greater purpose that move you to that direction. Or is like, things, all the dots started to get connected, somebody call it destiny, somebody other, serendipity, but whatever is the reason, whether you are spiritual or not, but something really put the things at the right place at the right time. But if we look through the lens of leadership, what do you think is the opportunity, by the way, for me is huge. It's incredible reach, the opportunity to learn and what I call the cross pollination when you can learn things from one industry and bring it to other. There are leaders that are desperate to be able to learn from other industries. So to me, it's done. It's an important actually skill to have in experience in career. So well done, Tracy. However, he put some question and some reflection like what is the most challenging things to do though when you are shifting industries as you did in a moment of time when you're really you are experienced enough, you're leader enough, you're senior enough, and because that's how human beings work. The more senior we become, the more experienced we become, the more we get a little bit wired in our own thinking, our way of seeing things. How can you approach this in a powerful way? And what are the challenges that you think there still exist in transferring to one industry to another?
For me, what I didn't realize was, if I look back at my career, all in telco, people in the industry knew who Tracy Nolan was, kind of what I stood for. I walk into healthcare and I walk into my first day with a new team of 4,000. And I'm assuming they know my positive intent and what I stand for and how I work. And at least every other company I walked into, someone or some people knew me, right? So I didn't realize the power of needing to reestablish, the trust and, my background. Like people had no idea what I did in the other industry. So it was like they were, and in the organization that I had, they had the leader who had been there for 15 years before retiring. So again, it was for me, it was humbling in the sense that I had to step back and not just say, because I did it over here, I can do it here. I needed to bring people along, and I needed to step back and, be super honest. I don't know what that word means. I don't understand what that is. It was okay to be raw and be, to show vulnerability before, and then, really rebuild a trust with an organization and not just say we did it this way before, so we do it now, but to listen and learn. And the power of communications is probably the one thing as you go from one industry to the next that people lose at senior leader levels, because they come in and they just assume that they can go and they know what to do and they're going to have all the right answers. And you really have to sit back and take some time to learn and bring and what's really going on, before you go to that. Now, again, someone like me doesn't wait long. Remember, I had 7 months to make a major change, right? So I'm kind of in a hurry when I do things, but it's really the power of communications and getting to know what the consumer, what the customer wants, and what the employees need to be able to deliver, the overall objective.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense. It sounds a great approach, by the way. And you also introduced the element of trust. One of the things that you're known for. I mean, I know that you speak often about the importance of clarity and trust when you lead. And you call it a 3 point landing approach to setting expectations and building cross functional trust. And that's critical. I mean, in a world where many leaders are not clear enough in terms of what they expect from their own people, clearly trust gets eroded because then expectations are not met, and et cetera, confusion, misalignments, misunderstanding, you name it. How does that work in practice for you? And how did you come up with it in terms of this approach? I'm really interested because to me it's a foundation for extraordinary leadership. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So I first on trust, and it leads into the 3 point landing. I never take for granted that just because I trust someone or someone, my team that's directly reporting to me, that they trust me. And I think that's a big one that people miss is, as much as the team needs to build trust with me, I need to build trust with them. And that means, like, if I have a one-on-one, I don't cancel the one-on-one. So many times, like, talking to your team, you think, oh, they're fine, they're good. But like taking the time to have those critical conversations and not letting anything stand in the way of giving them time with me, understanding, who, like, what's going on with them personally, in the sense that if they want to say something or they have a family issue, I mark it down and I make sure I double check with them, a week later, and it's on my to-do list because it's important to them, right? Understanding what's important to them. So building that trust is really a two-way street. And one of the ways that we have established it is, we all as leaders can get super frustrated when somebody doesn't deliver something on time. So I created what I call a 3 point landing, and it's what it is, how it's going to come, and when is it going to be delivered. So every deliverable has what is it, and when are we going to get it, and then how are you going to deliver it? Is it through email? Are we going to have another meeting? So if we leave a critical meeting, we always say, well, what's the 3 point landing? And it's a negotiable, right? Can I negotiate it? I say, this is when I'm expecting it, and they say, well, how about this? And it gets very specific to, it's going to be an email by 5 p.m. on Friday. it's going to be, we're going to set up another meeting in 3 days from now. And so then I literally will mark it down, they mark it down, and then we're clear. And then there's no misunderstandings. And if something has to be pushed out, they're like, hey, can we just push out at the 3-point landing by 2 days? Can we renegotiate it? And it works so well that I had within your own team, but even more so when you're relying on other departments or other people in the organization who aren't part of the organization to deliver. And we had this one individual in IT, and he was always known for delivering late. So what we ended up doing is literally creating 3-point like cards, and with 3 points, and we'd write it down and we'd tape them on his door, right? And then he would bring it over and he'd tape it back when he was done. And it was a way of diffusing stress and concerns between organizations by creating a fun way that says, this is how we're going to work together. And I think that a lot of the miscommunications and lack of deliverables and frustrations come when you're not aligned. And so it was a way of creating trust and alignment beyond it that was so critical for us. And I still use it. I mean, I was just on a call before this call where someone said, okay, the 3-point landing is to get this to you tonight by 5, Tracy, in a PowerPoint, 2 to 3 slides with this. And I'm like, yep, that's great. So it's kind of normal language that we use, but it really helps.
Yeah, so I have so many comments on this because, first of all, I have a different framework, but it's very similar in terms of that is really a language for commitment. So, where people are clear on what they're committed to, they're clear who is doing that, and by when, you know exactly what is needed to drive performance. It's so simple as a framework. And now you have a slightly different version, but it's the same really thing. It's wonderful. And by the way, it's also staggering how the simplicity of a framework like this can really drive performance that otherwise without that people not able to achieve the results. So important language, and the integrity, of course, that you say you're going to do something, you do it. So because to me, if there is one flaw in entire business world, is the inability for people to live and lead with integrity, meaning doing one thing and then say one thing and do another thing, which to me is the really foundation for leadership, culture, performance. So kudos to you, because to me that is a fantastic way to drive performance. What do you think has been the biggest challenge? I mean, you mentioned one example of somebody that was always late, but what do you think is, if we go a little bit deeper, what do you think is, maybe you agree with what I said in terms of integrity, but what do you think is the main reason why people really struggle to accept some sort of personal commitment, to stick with the deadline, to stick with the deliverables? To me, it's a no-brainer, and probably is for you too. But what do you think is in the background that you know doesn't help people, prevent people from operating in such a simple way that really drive results?
I think number one, while I think I'm a great communicator, most of the time, I would tell you that my team would say occasionally they're not following what I'm asking for. So, that number one, I think one of the reasons is that we think we've said what we need to have done, or they think they've said what they need to get done and what they're going to do, and it's a miscommunication. Because I truly believe that most everyone comes to work and wants to do a great job. Like, I
I
really,
agree.
truly do. Like, I think there's very few people that want to come to work and fail. Like, I just don't think, or
Or
not
waking
do
up
a
in the
great job.
morning, say,
Right. I
today
mean,
is going to be just
right.
a shitty day.
Right. Like, so I always tell leaders, like, before you start to say why this person's not performing, it's either a mismatch of skills and set, or it's lack of understanding for the most part. I also do think, though, that if you don't have that key underpinning of trust with your leader or who you're working with, there is this fear of failing and not delivering that holds some people back from not doing it at all, because then they can say,
Yes,
I didn't do it, right? So I think it's, for me, what I found, it's either totally, someone hasn't communicated properly, or it's this, I'm not really sure, so maybe they'll forget it they'll forget that they asked for it, right? Like and maybe I won't have to do it, so maybe I'll just not do it. But then that really goes down to a trust, a trust level. So if you can get the trust, commitment and teamwork all come along with it, integrity. And so, people ask me sometimes, hey, how do you write, all your strategic plans? It really starts with building a foundation of trust, and a really solid communication has been really the key of what I consider a strategic plan, because you can always build, plans on what you want to accomplish. But if you don't have that, unless you're going to be, a sole proprietor, I'm not sure how you're going to achieve the level of success that you could.
Yeah, yeah. Well said, really. The last comment from me before we move on to another interesting area that I'm happy to explore with you. I think is there needs to be the conditioning environment for people to say no to a request like this. I want this by 5 or whatever. Because if people they don't have the opportunity to renegotiate the terms, if you like, they're gonna always say yes by compliance, not really because they are committed to. And that is a totally different story in terms of really driving performance. There's not a good pathway for performance compliance. So, but I think it's worth saying because in some environments, and clearly it's not yours, some leaders have set up an environment where people essentially they just nodding and do or say they're going to do what has been asked for to do rather than really doing because they feel it.
No, I completely agree. And that being able to say no, or hey, we all think we know what everybody's working on, but we don't know. Like, it's easy for me to say, hey, so and so is not, busy, but I don't know that they're not busy on 6 other things that maybe haven't raised to my level. So giving them that ability to say, hey, can we negotiate it, is really important.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And that's also help us to see things from a different perspective, which is their perspective, not always ours. Um, Look, I know how critical important is for you the people element of your work. I mean, you care about your team, you care about people, you spend time with them. So, and you put a strong emphasis, in particular, to what we call the emotional intelligence. So, reading people, stay there and listening to what they're going through, caring, and there are different connotation that we give to the word emotional intelligence. But clearly for you, it's important to make sure people feel heard and seen. So how do you create a kind of connection environment where people really feel that way, especially in moment like this time, not necessarily for Humana, but for the environment where the level of pressure is so high and people are stressed and it's feel people feel like it's difficult to speak up. How can you create that moment when survival, in other words, tends to prevail in people?
So, I do make it an important part of my week. So I have every week I hold really a couple things. I hold a talk with Tracy, which is just getting, and it's all random, and it's every week it's an hour and a half depending on how big the group is, but the group can be 8 people, it can be 15 people, but it's a time where I ask them questions to really understand the business, and I ask tough ones like, "Hey, when you get home from work, what's the one thing that you're saying about, your day that was so, so hard, or if you could just change one thing." So I try to open up. It's not about Tracy talking about the work. I'll answer questions, but it's more about, tell me what is really on your mind. Tell me how we can make this company better. How do I make this culture better? How do we, and there are things that come up that occasionally we can't do, but like there's a lot of really good information. And so I protect that time on my calendar, and nothing moves. And I would tell you, when I first got to Humana, I got a lot of like, oh, we got a lot of meetings. You can't, I don't know how we're going to fit these in. And I'm like, no, you're going to fit these in first. And then and then everything can go around it. So there are meetings I miss, even from, our executive team, when it comes to this, because this is critically important. I also, anytime a new leader gets promoted into a director role or above, I take and I have a Diet Coke with Tracy because I'm a Diet Coke or Coke Light fan, right? So we spend, a half an hour on the phone just kind of catching up and seeing what I can do to help. But I think, beyond that, it's really about helping people understand that your career path is really not up to your manager and it's not up to, some program that a company is going to have. It's really about you taking hold of your career, and that is learning. It's I'm a big a proponent of, learning, figuring out, finding mentors and sponsors. And I never even knew what a sponsor was. I knew what a mentor was, but, doing a great job at what you're doing and then involving and getting matches of people who can help sponsor and learn other parts of the business. So I do a lot of large group mentoring and giving back, because if I can help others learn about what isn't, how to be, as fortunate as I have been to achieve the career that I've had, which, was not what I thought I would be doing. I thought I might be a school teacher. I didn't know I might be working in retail. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I've been very fortunate to have people kind of push me into some uncomfort zones and have me do some things. I mean, some of my most proudest accomplishments are, two women who, one was just an individual contributor who became one of the top directors in the nation for Verizon. And then I had another woman who worked for me, who single mother of two young children, who now is, having a stellar career as a director at T-Mobile. So I love those stories because, if I could have helped people achieve that, but it wasn't because they went through some program. It wasn't because, it really was all about gaining confidence and letting them, helping them achieve things that they didn't think that they could even do themselves. So it's pushing people who have talent to do a little more than probably they think they can. And then they see they can, and then they want to do more.
That's amazing. Do you consider yourself a role model?
Others would consider me a role model. I consider myself a caring person and a leader who strives to do the best at what she can do, but loves to highlight what others do and what they achieve.
Yeah, that's a great answer. So, on reflection, I mean, you said it's a moment of time in your story, in your life, in your career that you want to give back, and you're doing through mentoring, coaching, organization, sharing, giving space and time for people to get with you and sharing and you can share your learning, etc., which is amazing, really, and it speaks highly about you. But if you consider a larger audience, even at the moment outside of your own company, what kind of suggestion would you like to give to those people? And if you want to focus on women, it, please do that. Otherwise, broader, what suggestion would you like to give? You said, for example, hold your career, take responsibility of your career. It's not up to others to shape it, to create it. And I do agree, it's definitely your personal responsibility. But what other advice would you like to give to those people that have ambition? They want to do something good in their career. They are not satisfied with the status quo. What would you say to them?
I would first of all and say that, the first thing you need to do is do a really great job at the role that you currently have. That's super important because that's the foundation. That's like, that's table stakes. But where I found what helped me, in my career that I would want others to do is look at what I call the other three pieces besides your performance, which is, what are your peer relationships like? And not just peers within your company, but peers outside, and learn and start to get a network. Because so many times I see people who, were at Verizon for 30 years. All of a sudden they leave and they want to go do something else. And the only people they have in their network are people who are, at Verizon. So like, think about building out your network, your peer base, like your peers. Stay extremely close to what consumers and understanding consumer behavior, what consumers want, because that is a need in any role, whether you're in IT, whether you're in finance, whether you're in sales, like understanding consumer behavior. And consumer behavior is changing so dramatically now with AI and other things coming in. And, I took a friend's daughter to, we went out to lunch, and then we went to a mall, and I was like, oh, cool, we're going to shop. And the daughter, who was 12, said, I don't like to shop. Like, why would I go into a store? I just buy online. And it blew me away, because I remember growing up, like going to the mall was like the funnest place to go, but like understanding consumer behavior. And then I would also say that think about your boss and who you work for, and ensuring that like everybody thinks their boss is to manage them. I look at it as it's my job to manage my boss. And what I mean by that is like, how do you make his life or her life a little easier? What are her priorities? And what are you doing to help? In it may not even be within your own, direct responsibility. What are they working on that you can add value to? Because that is going to help you grow your career, right? It's all of those things. And so many times, and I know at one point I didn't focus on what my boss, or I had someone say to me the other day, well, Tracy, I'm number one in this, and I've done this. And I said, that is so great. And they're like, I'm sorry, I'm bragging. I go, honestly, I knew you were good, but I had no idea you were achieving those things. And they said, well, it's on the sheet. And I go, I have 4,000 people. I don't have time to always know what everyone's doing. So you got to do a little bragging too. You got to be able to like tell your story, create your story and your vision. And then the last thing I'd say is that I was mentoring for years, and every year he would come in with a vision board of what he wanted to achieve. And at the one of my end of 2 years ago on a November, he said to me, Trace, what's your vision board look like? And I went, vision board. And so I now put down what I want to achieve for the year, both personally and professionally. And it has been a change. I wouldn't be here on this podcast if it wasn't for that, because that was part of what I wanted to do this year. So, that visioning of what you want in the future, and then really looking at, all those aspects are super critical.
Amazing. Such a great reflection and takeaways for people. And by the way, I'm glad I fulfill your one of your
Yes, you did.
one of your dreams. So
Thank
I
you.
feel definitely honored. Tracy, thank you so much. It's been such an amazing conversation. So many gems and pearls of wisdom that you share with the audience. Practical, but also very genuine, natural, tainted. Because I can see that's you. So thank you so much, Tracy. So where people should go if they want to find you, connect with you?
Definitely go out to my LinkedIn profile, and I will be soon launching a website there. So you can connect even further within the website. Should be out in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So very excited about that. And I just want to thank you very much for having me on your podcast. It's been a complete delight, and I really appreciate it.
Fantastic. Tracy, thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.